In episode 6, Joe is being careful with his following of Marion. That doesn't stop him, though, from breaking into her apartment. He starts going through his normal routine, though, but he has to stop himself and remind himself that this time it's different, so put all the stuff back. But Marion ends up coming home earlier than expected, which forces Joe to hide under the bed. He starts wondering why exactly she stepped out of her routine as she starts getting undressed. But then he ends up getting a text message from Love asking him where he is, and he thinks, oh, this is ironic and what I deserve. He lies to Love and says, I'm staying late at work, I'll be home soon. But he starts realizing how lucky he is to have Love. Love is at home, taking care of his son, being a great wife, while Joe is hiding under a bed trying to prove that Marion isn't worth it. As Joe is kind of having a come-to-Jesus moment, Marion is stepping out, although Joe doesn't know who she's meeting with. He thinks it could possibly be a date. But while Joe is getting text messages from Love, Love is getting text messages from Theo, although she's not responding to any of them. And that might be because she's late, so she had to pick up a pregnancy test. The stress of the situation causes Love to text 40, which is a pretty regular occurrence. She knows nobody's going to answer, but it's therapeutic. And as she's texting him about the fact that she might be pregnant with Theo's child, she starts hearing something from the outside, and it's Theo holding up a boombox, just like the scene from Say Anything, although Love is way too young for that. Theo, though, was kind of desperate because Love wasn't responding to him, so he had to get her attention somehow. And while he's still infatuated with her, he actually needs some advice because Matthew has come back. He was supposed to be out of town for a month, but he came back early, and he's clearly distracted and not doing well. He didn't really even notice that Theo had taken a leave of absence from school. Love tries to explain to him, Matthew is grieving, so you need to be there for him. So go take care of him and try to see where he's coming from. Right before Theo leaves, he asks Love, when you have sex with your husband, do you see my face because your face is the only face that I see? And that's when Love kicks him out. And when Love gets back inside, she's trying to figure out why she had the affair if she's, quote, so happy in her life. 5 feet away, you've got Joe, who's counting the seconds until Love goes to bed so that he can follow Marion. The two, however, do end up having sex that night, but just like Theo said, she's thinking about him, and Joe is certainly not thinking about Love. He's thinking about Marion. This will be the last time that Love gets laid in a couple days because the next day, she has to head out to a women's summit at the new vineyard that Dottie bought. And boy, does she not want to go to it. As soon as she shows up, she sees that Dottie is doing an Instagram live with Sherry. And she thinks, yeah, of course Dottie befriended Sherry. That makes sense. This whole summit's supposed to be like a woman empowerment thing, but it's more of like a vomit-inducing thing. When Dottie ends up seeing Love, she offers her some wine, but Love says no. And Dottie does ask, are you pregnant? But Love tries to lie and say she's on a mini detox, and Dottie sniffs that out. She's convinced that Love is pregnant. And that begs the question from Dottie, is it Joe's or is it Theo's? Love, though, can't even respond or deny it because Dottie ends up getting distracted by somebody more popular. Later on in the summit, Sherry and Dottie do convince Love to be a part of an Instagram TV interview for the summit, but, to promote their brands, whatever influencers do. Love begrudgingly agrees, but during the interview, Dottie lets it slip that Love is pregnant, and Love freaks out, grabbing the phone, shutting it down, and telling Sherry that she needs to get the fuck out of there. She yells at Dottie, how could you do that? I haven't even told Joe. And Dottie says, well, that's not surprising. Problems in your marriage seem to keep stacking up. Love starts yelling at her mom that her business is not for her to share on social media, and Dottie says, don't speak to me like that. And Love says, well, somebody has to. I mean, you're the reason why me and 40 ended up like this. And Dottie starts screaming at her about how ungrateful she is. She screams, your decision to have an affair with the neighbor boy has nothing to do with me. If you want the source of your unhappiness, look in the mirror. It's not all bad for Love, though. She ends up getting her period, so she's not pregnant. She ends up grabbing a bottle of wine and just heading to her room. So Love is at this miserable summit. Joe is at the library, still trying to compile more information on the riddle wrapped in an enigma known as Marion. He noticed she left for shift early, which never happens. He ends up convincing Dante to let him in her office. He starts poking around and he finds a Madre Linda recovery meeting schedule, which is bizarre. He then finds a flash drive that's buried pretty deep in a drawer. And when he pops it in, it's court records. Marion was taken to court by her ex for child neglect, misdemeanor, verbal and emotional abuse, reckless endangerment. And this is stuff that Joe had never expected. He starts telling himself that he has a loving wife and a son, and he doesn't want to get involved in such a hectic life. so the itch has been scratched, but we know it hasn't. Right before the library closes, Marion has come back, and she yells at Joe because she has to lock up, but Joe is taking his time in the basement. And all of a sudden, Marion says, "Actually, Joe, stay down there." And Joe can hear a male voice getting pretty heated. Whoever it is yelling at Marion, "I can't believe you got a lawyer." And then there's a big crash. Joe runs up to see what's going on, and there's Marion's ex-husband, who turns out is a local news star. Joe tells the guy that he needs to leave, and Marion is clearly upset. And as soon as her ex does leave, she starts yelling at Joe that was none of his business. She didn't need him being the white knight, and he should have did what she told him to do and stay in the basement and let her deal with it. But as Marion is screaming at Joe, it finally dawns on Joe. He's attracted to Marion because he has mommy issues. It's a breakthrough moment for Joe. Right before he leaves, though, he does tell Marion, "I'm not sorry. I don't let bullies just bully. I would have done that for anybody." Later that night, as Joe is in bed reading, gets a phone call from Marion, and she tells him it's an emergency, and that's because the sprinkler system malfunctioned and most of the books in the library are ruined. And when Joe shows up, Marion is really, really upset because she figures this might cost her job. Joe tries to make her feel better by telling her she's not going to lose her job, and she did call the best book doctor in the world, so they'll be able to salvage a lot of this. As they both start cleaning up the mess, Marion apologizes for how she acted earlier. The more they clean up, though, the more that those urges are coming back to Joe, and he has to keep the tiger in the cage. He does ask her what her daughter is like, and she says she's amazing. The more she talks about her daughter, the more that Joe wonders, how the hell could you have ever hurt her? They start talking about parenthood and how Joe is worried that this cookie-cutter suburban lifestyle isn't what's best for Henry. And that's when Marion says, "I get it. I mean, raising kids is a whole different game when you come through the system." And Joe had no idea that Marion had also gone through the system. That's probably why all of a sudden she turned on a dime when he said that he was adopted. He starts talking about his childhood to her, and it's stuff that he's never even divulged to Love. Joe then asks exactly what happened with the baby and her ex. And she tells Joe that they were both addicts when her daughter Juliet was born. She ended up getting into a car accident while under the influence. Juliet was in the car. She had been on the other side. She probably would have died. And Ryan, her ex, just got clean before she did. It also helps that he's a local TV personality. The community trusts him. They don't care that he kind of sabotages her in the court system and has a lot more money to throw at lawyers and whatnot. Joe apologizes and says that Ryan manipulating the justice system needs to be stopped. And Joe would love nothing more than to be that guy. But Marion tells him, "I'm working on it. I met with a lawyer yesterday." As they're having this conversation, the sprinkler system goes back on, and it's dousing them. And that's when they look at each other, and they start making out. It only stops when the sprinkler system goes off. They end up not even talking about it, just going home. The next day, Joe decided to nip this thing in the bud. He's written up his resignation letter, and he heads to the library to hand it to Marion, but Marion is trying to act like nothing happened. Eventually, though, she just comes right out and says, "I do have feelings for you, Joe, but I'm not trying to split up your family. So let's just continue to work together and just let it dissolve into nothing." But Joe tells her it's not nothing. "I have feelings for you too." They start once again kissing, but Marion pulls back and says, "No, you gotta go. You gotta go before this gets further." And Joe tells her, "I actually came here to resign." Marion tells him, "You don't have to do that, but we should probably talk when we're more clear-headed about the whole situation." Joe feels pretty clear-headed, though. He just has to figure out what he's going to do with Love. And Love has made it home, but she has pretty big news. She got pretty hammered the night where she had the fight with Dottie. Hammered to the point where, while she was texting 40, he actually texted her back. All of a sudden, she started having hallucinations where 40 was back from the dead talking to her. It was enough to actually make her delete 40's number when she got up in the morning, because she wasn't texting 40. In reality, when she woke up the next day, she gets a knock on her door, and it's Theo, because she drunk dialed him at 4 in the morning. Theo, though, came to see how she was doing, but he also came for another reason. He ended up doing what she said, trying just to see how Matthew was doing and take care of him, when he walked into his office and saw all this information on people from the neighborhood, because Matthew had hired a private investigator at the behest of, I'm assuming, his business partner. Business partner was really concerned with the fact that if the neighborhood found out that Matthew was having people watch them, lawsuits and overall bad PR for his company were going to follow. But Matthew is convinced the story that is being told about Gil isn't true, so he wants to do his own research. He didn't tell Theo about this, though. So when Theo sees all of it, he's a little concerned. And he tells Love, "Yeah, Matthew's gone off the deep end. I mean, he's got all this information about everybody, including you and Joe." And now, Love is pretty stressed out about it. So as soon as Joe walks in the door, Love lets him know Matthew is got somebody watching all of us. He doesn't think Natalie's case is closed, and I don't know what he has, but I might be able to find out because we know that Theo has a crush on me. So what if I just make him think that he has a shot in order to get information from him? And Joe is all for this because if she's doing this, she'll be too distracted to see what Joe is doing with Marion. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought this sucked. Make sure to be nice in the comment section. If you don't see the next video up in the end screen there, I'll get it up in a few days, not to worry. And I have merchandise, so go buy a mug or something. It's never too early to think about Christmas gifts, folks. But once again, thank you for checking out this recap.